Sweet. Okay. Thanks for everyone's time today. Thanks for joining. My name's Simon. I am an architect here at Maestro, and as Jake mentioned, we're going to be running through Maestro MCP today. We're going to do a brief introduction on it, and then we're going to jump into some testing scenarios, and then try and cover some slightly more advanced moving stuff that you can kind of hopefully take away and test on your own app and kind of figure it out. Let us know how you find it, and kind of get tests up and running really quickly, and also help maintain them super easily as well. So we'll jump in. So to start with, what is MCP and the installation of it? So I've got two links here. The first is a link to our blog website, and this is just an introduction page that I wrote to cover MCP. So it just talks about what MCP is, which at the root of it, in plain English, it's an interface between your LLM AI tool and also Maestro. So it exposes all the tools and APIs that Maestro uses under the hood to effectively drive your app, write Maestro commands, all those kind of things. So it makes using Maestro super quick and easy, which is cool. The main use cases I kind of cover in here. So we've got test creation, super quick and easy to create tests. You can use interactive test execution, so you don't have to create the test directly. You can just use the Maestro commands and the MCP to kind of drive the device effectively. You can use it to maintain tests. So we all know maintenance burden of test automation is one of the kind of biggest challenges teams run into when they're moving forwards with kind of a large testing suite and kind of just keeping it like going and moving along as product iterates and develops. And then we also have device management. So you can do a lot of stuff with your devices, with your simulators, emulators, that kind of thing. And you can also use it for kind of documentation querying and referencing. We have some stuff here on getting started with MCP, so how to run it, how to install it, all of that kind of stuff. And that just links out to our docs website. So I definitely recommend going here and taking a look. If you just search for MCP, you'll find this page. It runs through, shows you a quick example of it, and then it talks about how to get started with kind of whatever respective coding agent or tool you're using. So whether that's Codex, Claude, Cursor, it should support all of those. So yeah, super quick and easy to get right started and up and running. So we'll move on. So just some brief stuff before I kind of dive in, just to kind of help you hopefully get better results. Context is king. So as I'm sure you will have experienced with using AI tools before, using LLMs, if you give it like a really loose generic question or prompt, you will often get quite a loose generic outcome. So I always talk about context is king. So the more information and the more context you can provide the tool and the MCP with, the better results you will have. Cool. Sorry, I'm just hiding that. And yeah, so with regards to that, you can use things like I'm going to be using Claude today. So you can define a Claude.md or equivalent prompt rules. And that's just going to be a file effectively with a set of instructions or prompts that your LLM can use to influence the work that you're doing and the testing that you're doing. So here's an example today where I have defined a Claude.md and I just kind of give Maestro MCP some loose instructions. So some things that I like, some rules I want it to abide by and kind of continue with. So things like don't use coordinate taps where possible. Ideally use things like text, accessibility text, or ID. MCP is smart enough to always try and use these anyway, but it will like fall back to coordinate taps if it can't find this kind of thing. So I just want to make sure that we don't use coordinate taps wherever we can, because that can be quite fragile and it can break when we try and test across devices and different screen sizes. The second one, where elements aren't unique, ideally use a relational selector first. So in this instance, I give it some commands of using things like above, below. So this just allows you to define where an element is in relation to another element and kind of rely on it that way. Or we could fall back to an index if that doesn't work. Some more kind of housework tidying things here. So we're going to get to Maestro Cloud later. So here we just talk about you have to submit up an API key as part of this call. Um, Maestro MCP will prompt you for that, and it will ask you to input that, and then it can remember it. All I do is I define my Cloud API key in a file, and I just kind of reuse it. So I just kind of point it there, so it can just kind of go away, grab that, and just kind of seamlessly run it. Um, Always use clearState true whenever using a launch up command. So I want to ensure that my tests can be run independently and they're clean every time. So I want to make sure when I launch the app in my Maestro tests that the clearState flag is true. That means it's giving me a fresh app from the start and it's not kind of just launching the app and reusing like an existing state. The last one is around app files, so just a generic one. So for any app files, I just keep them in my documents folder under apps, and that's just an easy central location to find them. So we're going to get started. We're going to jump right in, and we're going to look at some test creation or authoring. So we're going to create some basic tests for navigation and search. So I have got my simulator here. I've got the Wikipedia app already installed. You could use MCP to kind of launch your iPhone 17. You can use it to install your Wikipedia app as well. But I've just got it up and running for a start. Just for some context here, I'm using Claude Code and I'm using it within Visual Studio Code today. So just within the terminal here. And the model I'm using is Opus 4.8, so the latest Opus, and it's got high effort thinking on because sometimes people ask kind of which model I'm using, and that's the one that is kind of running today. So we are going to, first of all, we're going to ask it to show me MCP Viewer. So this is a tool that we have added recently that allows you to easily show Maestro Viewer, which will launch here and it will connect to your device in a second. And effectively, it will just allow you to show you the commands here and kind of what your device is doing. So I'm just going to split that on the right and put this over here. There we go. I'll drag this down a little bit so we get a bit more of a view of that. Cool. Okay, so we're going to jump straight in. I'm going to give it a prompt where I want it to launch the Wikipedia app, and I just want to check that we land on the home screen of the Wikipedia app and the tab bar is visible. I'm going to ask it to create a Maestro flow where we launch the Wikipedia app and check the tab bar is visible. So this is kind of pretty much plain English prompt. And we should hopefully see over here after it starts thinking. It'll start generating the commands within this Maestro MCP section, and you should see the app kind of running and executing the commands on the right over here. So here we go, just installing the Maestro driver. And we've kicked off. So it's reinstalling the Wikipedia app fresh and it's starting to build the test. So the first thing it's done is launch the app with the clearState true like I asked it to, and it's going to think some more. So now we have to handle the onboarding. So we didn't give it any prompts around that. We just let it kind of think about that logically and handle it, which is a step that we're going to have every time that we launch the app with a clearState. And now we are landing on the home screen and we can see here that the tab bar is visible. So we've already got a test and it's already here. So it's asking us, do we want to create the Wikipedia tab bar YAML? So we've got the test here. We can kind of have a look at it, see what it's done. It's pretty simple. We're just going to hit yes to create that. And then we're going to open it here. And now that we've created it, it's going to run through it again. So you're just going to see the commands queue up again as it steps through. And there we go. We've got our first test up and running and passing. So it's going to give us some notes as well. It's going to tell us what it's encountered. So it's going to talk about clearState true, like I mentioned. So it's handling the skip, which is cool. It's what we want it to do. and it's handled a match via accessibility label. So what I would like to do, I'd like to expand this test to kind of check for the individual tab bar elements themselves. So at the end of the test, I'm going to ask, it to assert that the individual elements of the tab bar are present. So there you go, super quick and easy. It's just figured out all of them there, and it's asking us if we want to make this change to the file. So it's added an assertion for each of the individual tab bar elements. So checking that the Explore tab is there, Places, Saved, History, and Search, which are all present. And it's rerun the flow again just to double check. So a nice part about the Maestro MCP is that it will, every time you kind of make a change, make a tweak, do something different, create a test, it will run the flow for you. So it will give you that validation and confirmation that what you have changed or what you've done is working and passing. So it's suggesting that it can scope them with a relational selector or use tab IDs, and you can tie it that way. So it's suggesting that it's also found some IDs. So that's quite a cool suggestion that it can operate in that way as well. So under the hood, it can view the text of your app and also all the IDs and everything as well. So if you wanted to take more of an ID approach, you could shift to that. We're just going to leave it at text for now. So we've got that basic test, which is cool. And we're going to move on to the next test. So we're going to look at a search test. So we're going to create a new flow. So I want to create a new flow where we search for the text iOS and tap on the operating system value. So this test, I am going a little bit deeper. So I'm checking that we can search for a piece of text. So it should skip past onboarding. It should figure out to tap on the search bar. It should input the text up here. It's telling you it's input in 3 characters. It's coming back with iOS and it's done that. And now it's thinking a little bit more. So it's kind of having a look at the screen, seeing the results that we've got back, and it's figuring out which to tap on. And it has come up with this suggestion. So we'll have a look at that search file here. So you can see here, it's kind of harnessed the existing functionality that we had from the tab bar test to use the skip. It's tapping on the search Wikipedia, input in iOS, and then it's tapping on the mobile operating system by Apple. And you can see here it's landed on the iOS operating system page, which is cool. That's what we want it to do. So it's having to think a bit more, and it's come back with that it's been created. It is asking, so a nice part about it here is it gives you the information on what is created and why. And it's kind of telling you some of the decisions it's made. So for instance, just tapping on the text iOS would be ambiguous. So it targeted the subtitle, which gives it a unique option to select every time. And then it's even going further than that. So it's asking if we want it to add an assert visible at the end to confirm the iOS article opened, and optionally a tap on got it to dismiss that. It calls it a coach mark, which is interesting, but effectively it's this little pop-up here where it's giving you like a tooltip effectively. So from using Wikipedia app previously, I know that it kind of launches 3 tooltips, so it would have to try and handle them all. So yeah, I think that's a good suggestion actually. So rather than just finishing the test at the end of the tap on, we definitely want to check that the test has actually worked. It's navigated us to the right place. It's navigated us to the screen. And we also need to handle these tooltips. So we're going to say, yes, add the assert visible and also handle any tooltips. So it's handled the first tooltip by tapping on the text, I've got it. It's handled the second one again because it's looked under the hood. It's seen that there's a new tooltip, and there's a third one pop up as well. So it's also handling the third one as well, which is quite a niche aspect of the Wikipedia app here on first launch. That will prompt you with that. But we didn't have to tell it how many to handle. It just figured out that there were three. And now it should kind of look at the screen, figure out that there are no more tooltips, and add an assertion to check that we're landing on this screen correctly. So it's just thinking a little bit more. Cool. Okay, so what it's done is it's actually tried to be a bit smarter about this by wrapping it in a repeat while visible. So this is effectively a loop that is going to run rather than kind of handling them individually. It's going to run whilst that's visible. It's kind of just going to go wait for the animation to end and then rerun it, which is what it's done. And then it is a certain visible that we're landing on the screen mobile operating system by Apple, which is cool. So we're going to make those changes to it. And it's going to rerun the test again, just validate that the approach it's taken has passed. Tap on search, it's inputting iOS, tapping on the first option. Right, and now it's going to handle the tooltips, first one, second one, and third one. Now it's checking that there's no more tooltips and it's asserting that we are on this screen at the end. So it passes from a clean state, all 9 commands, including the tooltip loop and the assertion. So cool. Right, I'm going to pause there and just check, Jake, are there any questions at the moment that you want me to cover?
So Dan's in helping answer a bunch of questions already, but Marco was wondering about a suggestion of the 8 best agent to use with MCP and what effort.
Agent is a very personal thing. I would recommend most of them offer a kind of a free tier. They allow you to use a certain number of credits or usage or context of tokens, and they allow you to use that for free. So um, install them all, try out Claude, try out Cursor, try out Codex, and see which one kind of vibes with you, which one you get the best results from. I quite like Claude. I get some good results with Codex as well. So yeah, you can kind of swap and change, and often it's good. I think some really good development flows use a specific tool to kind of create the code, write the flows, and then they'll use like another tool to kind of review it. So it's not kind of the confirmation bias of reviewing its own work, which is a pretty cool approach. Um, Again, with thinking levels, you can try different levels and see kind of the results you get. Generally, you should be fine with kind of a medium or high level. High will just allow it to think a little bit longer. It's not like too deep that it needs any like max or ultra kind of thinking. So yeah, that should work fine.
Good stuff. We got a question. Will MCP work inside a Docker environment?
Yes, it should do. At the end of the day, MCP comes packaged with the Maestro CLI itself. So as long as you can download and install Maestro CLI, you should have access to the MCP within there.
Nice. Um, we got Augustin, kind of related to your previous question. What's the best model in Claude in your experience for using Maestro MCP?
Probably Opus. Opus allows obviously a little bit deeper thinking. You can use Sonnet as well. Sonnet gives some pretty good results, but Opus is a little bit more advanced. Obviously, we're using 4.8 now as we've moved on from 4.7 previously. I haven't actually tried it with the new Fable that's dropped this week, but that promises to be like super powerful. So yeah, I'd definitely be interested in trying that out and seeing people's feedback on how that works. But yeah, Opus 4.8 should be pretty good.
Nice. Oh, dude, we're getting an onslaught of questions. We might have to pause some and wait till the end.
Yeah, all good.
But we can move on so then we can get to Q&A sooner, folks. So hang in there.
Sweet. Cheers, Jake. Okay, I'll carry on then. So now we'll move on and do something slightly a little bit more advanced. So we've created this search test, and now we are going to um, extract the logic out and into a subflow. So we're going to look at taking that logic out and making it like reusable and repackage it so we can create like loads of different tests rather than having to hard code each test to like have its own search functionality. So what we want it to do effectively is to recognize kind of this functionality here where we tap on the search bar and we input the text iOS here. And ideally we would want it to make it parameterized. So we can just take any parameter, we can use it across tests. So I'm going to ask it to make the search functionality reusable by extracting it into a subflow. So what I want to see it do here is pull that logic out, create a subflow, ideally in a subflow folder, but we'll see what it does. And okay, so we have a search.yaml here where it's suggested it's given it a name, and we've got it's extracted the tap on of the search bar, and then it has created an input text with search term, and it's using a GAS variable, which is what we want it to do. We want it to take that parameter. Um, so it's updated that. It's passing in the search term of iOS. And yeah, that's what we want it to do. So we want it to run the flow, file search YAML. It hasn't created a subflow folder yet, so we might come back to that, but we'll just roll with this for now. And it will rerun that test. By the way, anytime if you want to kind of clear these commands, I'll show it after this is finished, but you can just press this trash can icon. Um, Nice. So it's passed in the iOS search term and it's handling the rest of the test now. But this is effectively what we want it to do. So now we've got the search YAML file here. It's reusable. It just takes the JavaScript variable of search term that we could pass in. So we could create a new flow and we can just grab this and copy and paste this and then change a search term, which is really cool and makes it way more flexible and reusable. Um, so what I'm going to do is move the search.yaml to a subflow folder. So what this should do is it should move it into a different folder just for kind of grouping purposes. And it should also recognize that the path here also should need to be changed. So yep, it's recognized that. It's made the update to our search test by adding the subflows prefix on. And it's created the folder up here and it's placed search YAML within that. So this is a cool way how like if you have some really deep reorganization to do, it's super easy to kind of prompt the MCP to do that, and it should recognize like the places where you called it, the places where that path exists, and it should handle the updates for you rather than having to kind of do a find replace everywhere as we used to do kind of years ago. So yeah, that's a pretty cool piece of functionality. It's just handling rerunning the test. Now that we've made the update again, just verifying that that works, and that's all passed. So yeah, it's talking about how the path is relative here. So we're all good. We'll clear that. And we'll move on to the next step. So now we're going to look at Maestro Cloud integration. So I'll quickly open this link. I will turn off my dark viewer because it ruins our beautiful newly updated website. So please do all go and have a look at our website. We've put a bunch of work into it to make it look some really slick. But yeah, this effectively talks about cloud. Hopefully, a number of you are kind of trialing or hopefully looking at trialing in the future, but we offer a free trial. So you can try it free, no obligation for 7 days for a week, and see how it fits you. We've got loads of top teams using it, and it's super easy to use. Very simple to how you would run a normal Maestro flow. and where you would normally call Maestro test, you simply just call Maestro Cloud. And then you just need a couple of different things, your API key, your project ID, and then it's exactly the same. You pass in your app file and your Maestro flow, and you're up and running, and you can run across loads of different devices. So we will jump into that. Um, we've also built a native MCP cloud integration tool. So Maestro MCP can integrate directly with cloud. You don't have to kind of mess around in the terminal. You don't have to kind of construct all these long commands that kind of you would used to do as part of CI or those kind of things. And yeah, we're just going to submit a single flow and then we're going to do the workspace. So we'll start off basic. We've got our tab bar test. And we're going to ask it to run this flow on cloud. We've got an iPhone 17 running 26 up, so on an iPhone 17. So we're just kind of going to ask it to mirror what we've done, and then we'll think about testing across devices in a short bit. Cool. So it's looking for our app file. We have told it where the app file lives previously in our Claude.md, so hopefully it should be able to find that relatively easily. And there you go. So Cloud is iPhone 17 on 26.2, and it's asking what we want to run. So we're just going to say, yeah, we want to run the tab bar test. Awesome. So it is going to run the test. It's zipping up the app file. And now it's calling Maestro now. And then after we do this the first time, it should recognize where things are. It's maybe having to zip an app file up, and then the next kind of time will be way quicker. So it's submitted the flow. It's given us a link, so we can jump straight to that. And over here, it's going to kind of poll and just kind of check. It's going to sleep and just kind of run in the background for now. And yeah, it's just going to kind of poll every 60 seconds. But yeah, we can see on our cloud dashboard here, we've got a run. It's given it a run of Wikipedia tab bar, iPhone 17, which is cool. Gives us some kind of useful information of what the name context of the run is. And it's running against an iPhone 17 and iOS version 26. So yeah, so it's just hitting cloud, it's preparing. We can drop into it and see it here. So it's going to kick off. And then in the meantime of that, in the interest of time, I'm now going to ask it to do a run against the workspace. So um, I want to run on cloud the entire workspace. And then we're going to ask for a slightly different device. So we're going to ask for, let's go for an iPhone 17 Pro Max to go for a slightly bigger screen. We can see here our flows hit cloud, it's installing on the device, and now it's running, and we can see the simulator over here, which is cool. And it's started installing the app, it's launching the app, and you can kind of see the steps as it's like picked it up and it's working along and running the test over here. And that test has passed. And we've got a green tick, success, which is awesome. So we can see here it's run through all the steps and it's done all the assertions of the tab bar and it's returned successful, which is sweet. So we're gonna, oh, got the poll come up. So now we're gonna ask it to run the workspace. So in this case, it should run both the tab bar test and the search iOS test, but not kind of run the subflows folder because that's obviously not a test that we want to run in isolation. It's like a utility subflow that we want to be used by these two. yeah, so it's kind of prompting us here. It's saying this is subflow and running standalone will likely fail. So I'll submit the whole folder as you ask and flag that result. Afterwards, I can tag it subflow and exclude it if you prefer a clean run. So it sounds like it has literally took the entire workspace and will run that. So we'll see what it does. I'll open the run. Nice. So yeah, it has correctly recognized that. It's running against an iPhone 17 Pro Max, which we can see here. So a slightly bigger device. It's running the two tests. So we have multiple parallel devices on our cloud account, which is a way to really supercharge your testing. So initially you can start with kind of one device and your flows will effectively form like a queuing system. So you'll have one flow run and the rest will queue up behind it and they will kind of feed in when that device is free and ready to use. Um, you can really supercharge it by adding more parallel devices, which means you can submit multiple tests or flows at the same time. So if you have 10 flows, you submit it and you have 10 devices, then they'll all get picked up at the same time and run in parallel, which is awesome. So we can open both of these. The devices are just preparing at the moment. We'll just let them run in the background and we'll come to that in a second. Um, and then we can do things as well, like smaller screen device testing. And we could test across like different operating systems. We can do some really, really cool stuff. So first of all, we're going to do that small screen device testing. So we're going to ask it to, I want to run the tab bar test flow against an iPhone SE on cloud. So you can see here we can do stuff in parallel as well with the MCP, which is pretty cool. We could submit like a run and then kind of go back to it and submit a different run, and it will kind of keep polling and call them. And then it's come back here saying it's tracking the previous run. It's submitted a new run for the iPhone SE. It's recognized that there's two SE models on cloud, and it's recognized that it wants to use the newest third gen one. So it's open that and it's returned here that we have two successes from our previous run of the 17 Pro Max, which we'll have a look at here. So we've got the search functionality here where we've passed in our JavaScript variable of iOS. It searched for that. It's landed on the iOS screen and it's handling the tooltips. So that's pretty awesome. It's also done the basic tab bar one. And then if we go back to our upload and just refresh that, we can see that the full upload against the 17 Pro Max is a success. So both tests are passed, which is cool. This is our iPhone SE test. And that's against the third gen, and that's just running. So we're just doing the tab bar test. And we'll leave that running in the background and we'll come back to that. And now I want to have a look at, let's think about if we want to do some more advanced stuff. So we have our search test here, and we want to run this across multiple different iOS versions. So we want to make sure that it's working across the latest and greatest 26, but then we also want it to run against like all the older versions of iOS as well that Cloud supports. So first of all, I'm going to ask it what versions we have. I'm going to look at like an older device. So we'll have a look at an iPhone 11. I'm going to ask it on cloud, what iOS versions does the iPhone 11 support? So we're going to prompt it for some information. And it's come back straight away from the cloud device list. The iPhone 11 supports these iOS versions. So two different versions of 16, 16.2 and 16.4. We've got 17.5, 18.2 and 26.2, which is cool. So I want to say run the, we'll just do a quick one. So we'll just do the tab bar. Run the tab bar flow against all iOS versions on an iPhone 11 on cloud. But before we do that, we'll just quickly go back. And it's compiling a nice little table of kind of because we submitted them at similar time. We've got the original run we did against an iPhone 17, then a Pro Max, and then an SE, and they're all success. And it kind of gives you the time taken and everything, the full workspace information and stuff. And over here we can have a look at our SE. So it looks a little bit squished because it's a much smaller screen, but it's definitely good to do some testing along here to kind of make sure that these are supported. Um, right, we're going to ask it to test across multiple iOS versions. Um, so it's saying 5 iOS versions as we just chatted about. So it'll submit 5 cloud runs, one per version, all in parallel. So this is something that would have taken you a little while to construct and type out in terminal and kind of copy and paste, but then change the different device OSs each time and kind of create like 5 different commands and then copy and paste each one individually previously. But with MCP, we can just ask it to do that and hopefully it will just handle all 5 kind of straight away. And then we'll just get 5 runs. And as we've got a number of devices on cloud, it should run them all in parallel. So it's just working through that, calling Maestro. Obviously, this is a slightly more complex command because we're asking it to do like multiple parallel things. So it has to assemble them. It's just not just a quick singular command, but it will save you the hassle of having to do it all manually, obviously. There we go. We can see that they've already started hitting cloud. So we've got a 16.2, 16.4, 17.5, 80.2, and 26.2 run. So interestingly, the old 16.2 and 16.4 have failed, which is good to know. So this is likely because the Wikipedia app requires a newer version of iOS. So this is really useful information to know. So you can see here it's saying that the min version that Wikipedia supports is 16.6 for iOS. So that's really useful to know. And maybe within your apps when you're testing, you also have min versions, and it's good to know that it kind of enforces that and it doesn't test across versions that it's not supposed to. So given that result, we would expect 16.2 and 16.4 to fail. So that's completely fine. And that's not like an app failure. It's something genuine that should have failed. And then we've got the other 3 running in parallel. So we can kind of see down here. And they're already passing. So we've got 17.5, 18.2, and 26.2. We'll just take a quick look through them, make sure they're all good. So yeah, you can see here, iOS version 17, 1 success. Next one, we've got 18.2, which is cool. That's run. We'll have a quick peek inside there, just make sure it's all good. Yeah, that's run and passed. And then our last one is 26.2, which is running currently. So that was the last one to get submitted. And that's passed just now as well. So super quick and easy. You can see it took me 2 seconds to type that command, and in that I submitted up the 5 different runs on multiple different operating systems. But you can imagine how you could use this really well against the apps that you're testing. You can just kind of take one flow, take your entire workspace, and you could submit like multiple operating systems or even multiple devices as well. You could target like an iPhone 11, an iPhone 15, an iPhone 17, and run over all of your flows across it. So it becomes super powerful, and it can assemble all that and handle it all for you, which is really cool. Um, and it's coming back with the results down here. So it's recognized that the app wasn't launched on the 16. The 2 failures are both on iOS 16, and in both cases, was app launched is false. So it failed before any of the session ran. That points to an app OS compatibility issue, not flow bug. So it talks about the minimum deployment target being above 16, which is what we discussed, and that's definitely expected. So that's all good to know. Um, awesome. I will pause there, and we can answer some questions if there are any.
Yeah, real quick, I think, let me see. We got a question around, do you need any additional skills for this MCP that you set up?
No, no, you don't need any additional skills. Obviously, you can add skills, and you can add kind of prompts and rules and that kind of thing to better cater for your apps. Give them direct instructions of things that are specific to you and your nature. But no, no skills needed as such. This is literally just vanilla Maestro MCP, just running.
Nice. Um, was asking, can we save a login session and reuse it for our other test cases?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what you would do with that is you would create the flow and you would do a similar thing to what we did earlier with the reusable search flow. So you would literally just ask it to instruct it to package up the login functionality and move it into a reusable flow. And then you would just, yeah, you just have your own login subflow. And then again, you could just call that across every one of your tests if you wanted to. And it makes it super quick and easy to then kind of move on and write. And also maintenance as well. You can imagine if this search flow is a login flow and it has kind of a lot of different steps, it's then only in one place. So if the login flow changes, we have to maintain it, we have to make an update. We're just updating it in one place in one flow file, and it will cascade through all of the different flows that then use this functionality.
Nice. Um, Christian Fiore asking, does running a test on Maestro Cloud, is it faster than running locally on a simulator?
Um, I mean, inherently, local execution is always going to be quicker because you have everything up and running already. Cloud, obviously, it has to spin up the device, it has to install your app on there, and do all of these things. So, by that nature, your local execution is always going to be slightly quicker. But cloud is pretty fast as well.
And I guess cloud too, once you get parallel devices, in theory, you could say maybe it's faster.
Yes, that's a great point. Yeah, obviously we are handling individual flows here, so whilst they are probably faster in isolation, I would have to run these two separately, kind of one after the other. Whereas if I submitted these two on cloud, they could run at the same time and in parallel with your devices. So yeah, you would get faster feedback.
All right, awesome. And then I feel like there's been a lot of questions Dan has answered. So we might want to revisit some of those to just see if there's any that would be helpful to answer live on top of what was shared. But um, I'll let you maybe wrap it up here.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, I wasn't going to do too much else. We've got the option of kind of creating some more flows, some really basic stuff that we could do just to show kind of adding some more functionality, and also screenshot snapshot testing. So I'll quickly do just some screenshot testing just to show how quick and simple it is. So with screenshots, what you can do is you can take a screenshot on your device and then you can use a command called assertScreenshot, and that will compare your new screenshot, like your current device screen, with a previous, what we call a golden snapshot, which is how you define it should look. So it's a good way to catch any visual regressions of things that might change over time. And it's a nice extra layer of testing on top of kind of asserting individual things because these assertions they might still be true, but text could have moved on the screen. It could be somewhere else. It could look slightly different. And whilst a regular vanilla text assertion would pass, maybe your screenshot would actually capture that someone has changed the element and kind of moved it. Maybe it's not visible anymore. Maybe they've moved it off screen. That kind of thing. So it's a nice extra layer. So I'm going to say I want to add assert screenshot command at the end of this test flow. Sorry, I keep calling it test. I should call it a flow. It's a flow.
You just saying, can you demonstrate golden snapshot workflow? Not sure this means.
Uh, Actually, I'm going to make it a bit more interesting rather than have it here. I'm going to interrupt that. And I'm going to move it into the search one because it's a bit more useful. Um,
Nice.
all right. Okay, move. Oh, move the screenshot assertion into my search flow. I think it queued it up. So there we go. So now it's thinking, and now we should hopefully move it over. So it's removing that. We want to remove from there, and we want to put it into here. So yeah, so it's suggesting that we make it here. It's also handily changed the name to iOS article as well. So I thought that it might just move it and it had given it a name of tab bar, which obviously wouldn't be applicable in this, but it's already recognized that it should update the name of the screenshot. So we're going to tell it yes, and we've got it in here. And now hopefully it's going to run the test. Now this is always an interesting one because when we run assertScreenshot, it has to do a comparison on an existing screenshot, which we know isn't there. Um, it wants to run it to generate the baseline. So that's a really good point. We need to have an existing golden snapshot, as we kind of mentioned. So we're going to ask it to run to generate the baseline. You can ignore that. That's just from the previous test when we interrupted it. So what this should do is it should hopefully get to this point in the test, search for iOS, land on the correct article. Again, it's going to handle the tooltips. And then it's going to try and run the assertScreenshot, which we know will likely fail the first time, but it will recognize, it will handle taking the screenshot, adding it into our repository, and then hopefully rerunning it. But we shall see what it does. So it should be taking the screenshot at this point because we know this is where we want it to be. There you go. It expects a baseline, so it's taking the screenshot. But it wants to get back to that point to ensure that it's at the right bit. Handle it in the tooltips. Right, it's thinking about it. So interestingly, it looks like it has selected a different page in this time, so that assertion is going to fail. So then the take screenshot will not be correct, which is interesting. Let's see how it handles that. Just in the interest of time, Jake, do you want to run through any questions? Because I'm conscious we only have 5 or so minutes left.
Yeah. Oh, you're getting some good questions on this specifically. So, Christian had a question on what level of accuracy does the asserting screenshot feature have in terms of like pixel perfect analysis?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you have a look at the docs and you go to the assert screenshot page, you will see a bunch of information here. So there is a parameter called threshold percentage here. So threshold percentage is just a number. It's a double format, and it will effectively match um, pixel perfect if you give it like 100%, because that means that you want an exact replica image and you want absolutely no differences at all. So you can kind of slide this up or down as you want to, which is useful to have because you might want to make some screenshot assertions a bit looser if they're a bit more varied, but you want them to kind of loosely match, or you might want them to be an exact match. We do default it to 95 because there is always going to be some really subtle differences. The main one being like the time on a device. So there's no way to kind of cut off the time unless you kind of just completely disregard the toolbar. So 95 is a pretty good accurate match that will allow for a little bit of difference in the toolbar and on the time. But you can ramp this up or ramp this down as applicable to you. But yeah, if you go for a 100, it will try and be pixel perfect. Cool. So just in that time, it has figured out what happened. So basically, it landed on the incorrect article in that point. So it's recognized that it should do some self-healing because it recognized that it probably reacted a bit too quickly after it searched. So it kind of searched for iOS and then it probably handled it by tapping on an article really quickly before the articles had kind of settled. So it's given an extended wait until to make it more predictable and more stable, and it's going to wait for the actual subtitle of the article to appear with a timeout of 10 seconds. And then it's going to tap on that. So in doing that, it's made the test improved, it's stabilized the test. It ran through, it took a screenshot. We can see the screenshot here, so it's added it to our repo, and it shows us on the article what it should look like. And then it just has the assert screenshot here. So it has the command there, and it's asking if we want to make those changes, which we can say yes to. And then it's just going to rerun the test. So that was a nice demo of it, recognizing that a little flake could happen in some places. So it's kind of self-healed to stabilize that functionality. And it's waited for that to appear, which means the test should be more dependent going forwards. So it's running through that, it's handling the tooltips, and it is after that going to do the assert screenshot where it compares the golden screenshot over here in iOS article to the current screen. And we can see that it's passed. So the assert screenshot of that has passed, which is awesome. Um, Sweet. So that's kind of all I think I'll cover for the moment. We can jump into a few more questions, but also just quickly wanted to plug our Slack community as well. So if you go onto our webpage, you can find the community tab. So that will redirect you to our Slack where we'd love to chat. We can try and help out with any issues you have. But yeah, we've got a great community there. Loads of people actively using Maestro, making suggestions, PRs, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a cool place to be and drop in. Jake, over to you for some
Nice.
questions.
Good stuff. A real quick follow on to the screenshot stuff was best practices to compare screenshots. You may have kind of answered this already, but in reality, data can change, so the actual screenshot will be different. Same for the clock and the status bar. Heuristic comparison may solve this, but also may miss overlook an actual bug.
Yeah, that is a great point. I'll reshare my screen really quickly and just cover something else. So as part of this, another really useful tool here for situations that you describe where screens might change slightly. You can use, we also have a crop on parameter as well, where you can pass in an ID. So with this, you can imagine it picking out a defined element on your screen. So if you want to just say like the toolbar ID or kind of element, and we want to assert the screenshot on that, it's going to only assert kind of the area of the tab bar. So that means that we want the tab bar. It shouldn't change too much, and if it does change, that is probably a significant visual regression that we want to be alerted on. So if you know that the screen is always going to be kind of have different kind of information on it, like within Wikipedia, the article every day, it's kind of rotating. So doing a kind of a screen assertion on the homepage is probably not very useful because of how much it changes and how non-deterministic it is. But I could pass in the ID of the tab bar here, and that would be kind of a good screenshot assertion because then it will only check the tab bar, and that should be static and it should be reliable to be tested by assertScreenshot.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Michael. Good to see you here on the webinar. I was just chatting with him earlier today. Um, awesome. Does the MCP is the MCP able to handle web view components?
Yes, yeah. So the MCP can do everything that Maestro can do. So as long as Maestro can interact with and run your web view, which it should be able to in most cases, the MCP will be able to as well. So it will just carry on looking under the hood. It will find your text, find your IDs, that kind of thing, and be able to perform all of your regular Maestro commands on it.
Uh, okay, this one we have. Let's see if we can figure out. Do we have any client representable result reporting format? Maybe this is related to like reporting outputs of like JUnit or something like that. But
Yeah, we have JUnit reports, we have HTML reports, and then on the cloud side we have Slack notification reports, we have email notification reports, and we also provide webhooks as well. So webhooks are just kind of the raw data from your Cloud Run, and then you can ingest them and transform them into whatever you want to transform them into. So it's a super powerful, flexible way for you to be able to report exactly on the information that matters to you.
Steph Parag's asking around. This is a good one. How can we validate the Figma designs using Maestro? What's the best strategy to validate the screen design?
Yeah, so we sometimes get these Figma questions. There is a Figma MCP, which is pretty useful. So you could definitely combine the Figma MCP to like ingest some of your Figma designs, and you could kind of pass that over to the Maestro MCP to ask it to do some similar things like assert screenshots based on like your Figma screenshots. You can also ask it to kind of look at the Figma screens and kind of check that like similar elements are on the screen to be able to kind of verify it that way. Yeah.
Nice. That's all our open questions. I'm just kind of going through if there's any last ones. We still got like 30 people on, but we are a bit over time. Um, seeing if there's any last ones that seemed interesting. Um, yeah, I think we're pretty good. I think we're pretty good.
Awesome. Okay. Well, appreciate everyone's time today. Thanks for dropping in and hanging on. And yeah, as we said, join the Slack community. Give Cloud a trial if you haven't already. It's an awesome way to be able to run your Maestro flows away from your local machine. And then you can start running them up in the cloud on devices, and you can hook it up into your CI/CD pipeline and get some really good results that way. And yeah, stay tuned for our updates that we have to the MCP. We're trying to make it more friendly and improve the usage for agents over time to make it like super powerful. So it's already made leaps and bounds, and it makes creating Maestro tests and maintaining Maestro tests like a breeze.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Awesome, Simon. Great demos. Thanks for all the answers. This is just what people are saying in the chat.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Come find us if you got more questions. We always love to talk to folks. So, yeah, we'll see y'all soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Take care.